Before we begin, it's important for us to acknowledge the land, even if we're not all on the same land right now. Toronto is a Treaty 13 territory that is also covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. X University is built on land taken from Indigenous people, specifically the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee, as part of an ongoing colonial relationship that we all must acknowledge and strive to overturn. I acknowledge my responsibility as an immigrant settler to this land to honor the rich histories and resilience of Indigenous nations, as well as the diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who make Toronto their home. June is not only Pride Month, but also Indigenous History Month. If you have not seen the news of it today, there was another mass grave found of 751 children in Saskatchewan at the site of another residential school. We will be taking a minute of silence to acknowledge and remember them. Starting now, I'll let you know when the minute is over. Thank you. If you're joining us from anywhere in the Americas or Oceania, you can learn more about the land you're on and who it belongs to by going to native-land.ca, which brings us now to Pride. While we're here to celebrate Pride 2021, we can't do so without recognizing the events and protests that have been foundational to Pride's origins. Pride, as you know it today, began out of the Stonewall riots in NYC in 1969. Stormé de la Verrerie was born on December 24th, 1920, and passed away on May 24th, 2014. She was a butch lesbian who scuffled with the police, according to Stormé and many eyewitnesses, was the spark that ignited the Stonewall riots, spurring the crowd into action. She was born in New Orleans to an African-American mother and a white father. She is remembered as a gay civil rights icon and entertainer. With respect to today's event, we want you to relax, have fun, and feel the joy that Pride brings along with writing. We want you to take a collective breath and let yourself be in the moment. This is a masterclass in writing, but also secretly in self-actualization. This is your moment to turn your dreams of writing into a reality. We hope that this is everything you need it to be. If you have any questions for Trey, please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A function, and we'll make sure that Trey answers them. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Trey Anthony. Trey is our own homegrown award-winning playwright, speaker, comedian, producer, educator, and new mom to her beautiful baby boy, Kai. She is best known for her play turned television series, The Kink in My Hair. She most recently published the book Black Girl in Love with Herself, a self-help book to guide women to living their best damn lives. Trey is currently a development producer at CTV Bell Media and is a contributing writer for the Huffington Post and a writer in residency at Soul Pepper Theater. For more information about Trey, you can go to www.treyanthony.com or follow her at Black Girl in Love on social media. Trey, we thank you for being here today, for your time, for your energy, for your light. We are excited to have you with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yay, thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you so much to everybody who is joining. This is a first time experience for me, actually, teaching a creative writing workshop virtually. So this is so new to me. I just feel like I'm talking to myself, which I do often, anyways, when I'm creating characters. So that's something that I do quite often. So, and you will find as writers that you do talk to yourself, and people are just kind of sometimes looking at you, but it's okay. It's okay. We can do that. And there's no judgment in that whatsoever. But as Natalie said, I would love questions throughout the process because I'm so used to being in the classroom, feeling the energy, people kind of putting up their hands halfway through my talk or saying they have questions and sharing their work. So that is something that is going to be different this time, that I'm not going to be hearing aloud some of your writing, which I really love hearing. And I love when writers get that moment of insight and they're like, wow, I'm actually a writer, like I'm writing, right? So I wanted to give you just a little bit of background for, um, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about me first, right? The first thing is I started writing, and I don't know if any of you guys are like this. I started writing many years ago as a little girl. I had a grandmother who really encouraged me to write. My grandmother loved me to tell stories, and she really encouraged me. And I was the type of person, I talk about this in my book, my new book, Black Girl in Love with Herself. One of the biggest things that used to happen to me as a little girl writing was my grandmother and I used to take this 2 hour trek every single Sunday to my uncle was incarcerated in prison, my grandmother's youngest son, and my grandmother would drive, and along that journey we would drive along the highway for 2 hours, 2 hours there and 2 hours back. And one of the things that I used to do to entertain my grandmother was write stories and read them to her. And a lot of the stories would involve my family and my family members, and I would make jokes, and my grandmother would really just kind of encourage me. I think I was a very indulged child for the longest time. And I always say that is where I learned to hold a audience captivated, was my grandmother in the car. And then later when we got to the prison to visit my uncle, he would be sitting behind a table and I would tell him all of the stories about what was happening at home and what he had missed. And because, he couldn't really go nowhere because he was in prison, he just kind of sat there and listened to me. And I think that's where I also learned the joy of having a live audience, right? Of watching me and me being able to tell stories. And I always say that's how I became a storyteller, right? Was because I had this history of having a family member who was incarcerated, who I felt got joy from me sharing what was happening on the outside world. And I had to become his eyes for him, right? And tell him what was going on in the world and making it entertaining. And I got a lot of just, I think a lot of like my family really got a lot of joy from me being the entertainer of the family and telling stories. And so for me, that's how I got my approval, was being that person. So I don't know if that resonates with any of you, of some of you who maybe if you look back on your own life and you think about like when did this joy or thought come about as a writer, um, maybe it's just you when you were really little and you didn't even realize that these were the things that you used to do. I also was a very avid reader. And one of the things that my grandmother did every single Friday, we were supposed to go to the library. I'm going to age myself now because you guys might not know this. For some of you young folks, right? There was a thing called the library, which I used to go to. And we would check out 6 books for the week. And I was supposed to read a book a day. And that's how I learned about characters and how I learned about stories and how I learned how to create chapters. And so I read books like by Judy Blume, Enid Blyton, who was really a famous like English author. And of course, they were all very, very white, right? And I didn't get the first book that I ever read by a Black author. And at this time, I didn't even know she was queer, was by Alice Walker, and that was The Color Purple. And my father actually gave me that book when I think I was 11 turning 12. And I was actually leaving England and leaving my father and leaving my grandmother to join my mother in Canada. And so that was the book that I was given to read on the 8-hour plane flight from England to Canada. And I always remember just looking at the book and going, oh my God, there's Black people. There's Black people in a book. And we're not talking about history, or we're not talking about slavery, because that was the only time I ever heard about Black people in school, was when we talked about slavery, right? So I was just in shock. And then I was in shock too that there was a Black female writer, Alice Walker, who had written a book. And that was the first time in my life, I will say, that the possibility and the thought entered my mind that I too could become a writer, right? And because I never knew that I could be a writer. And this is one of the reasons why right now I'm so visible and I'm so vocal about writing our stories, and especially as people of color and Indigenous folks, for us to be really able to claim our stories and our identities and our histories, and as queer people, because a lot of times we get left out of that history, right? And we get left out as people who actually create art, right? So that was something that was truly, truly important to me. And so I'm going to turn it back to you guys now, and I'm going to go to my presentation, because one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, how do I become a writer, right? I want to be a writer, Trey. How do I become a writer? I want to know how to write a book. I want to know how to write a play. I want to know how to write a screenplay. I want to know all of these things. So my first slide, Natalie's going to be my wonderful, amazing assistant. And I'm going to go to the second one, Natalie, for me. Right there. So you want to be a writer, right? Okay. You really want to be a writer. So what is the one thing, and this isn't a trick question, but it can be a trick question. Because I noticed that sometimes every time I ask this question in my live workshops, right? And now I don't know who's watching, so I don't know who actually is going to answer this correctly. What is one thing that all writers have in common, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of class? What is the one thing that all writers do? I love it. Samantha said they write. It's as simple as that. It is simple as that, right? Because people always give me wonderful answers. And yes, you're correct. Michael said they observe, they tell stories. Someone else said they tell stories. But the one thing, which is the most simplest thing, is they write. So I'm always shocked, right? When people say to me, I want to be a writer, and I say, so what do you write? And they're like, oh, well, I'm not writing currently. Like, I haven't written anything, but I'm thinking about it. And I'm doing a lot of research about it, and I'm going to classes about it. And this may sound familiar. How many of you have been taking class after class after class and reading every damn thing about writing, but you haven't written a damn thing, right? And I just call it like it is. You cannot be a writer unless you are writing. And it's as simple as that. You have to start writing, right? And then the other thing that I ask people is, why do you want to be a writer, right? Why? For me, wanting to be a writer was because I was really tired of the lack of women of color writers that I saw. I was really tired because I started out in this industry first being an actor. And I remember, and I talk about this a lot, I remember going on auditions, and I got, Baby Mama Number One was the script that was given to me. Baby Mama number 2 was the other script. And then there was Black Girl on Welfare number 3. And then there was Black Girl with Attitude number 4. And then there was the chubby but funny best friend. And I was just like, are you serious? This is what we're doing? Like, this is the only way that the world sees me. And I remember going home one day after an audition and I was in tears. And I said to my grandmother, I was like, I just hate these shitty scripts that I keep getting. And I know I'm a good actor. And I said, but I hate it. I said, they just give me shit. And I remember my grandmother said to me really clearly, she said, well, if they're giving you shit, why don't you write your own shit? It can't be any shittier than the shit they're giving you. And that was that, right? And so I always say to writers, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? And I think a lot of us get caught up. And if this resonates with you, in please let me know in the chat of I have to write the perfect script. I have to write the perfect book. It has to be perfect. The first draft has to be wonderful and amazing. And it doesn't have to be that. Finn said yes, right? Because it really doesn't. You just have to start somewhere, right? And maybe some of you right now have this burning desire that there's a story that's in you that is dying to be birthed, right? Or how many times have you told a story about something that has happened in your life and people are like, damn, that should have been a book. Or man, that should have been a film. Or oh my God, that's an amazing story, right? Or you've heard something like just recently I heard a story and a friend of mine, she told me that she is now turning 40 and both of her parents recently died like within a year of each other. And she was clearing out her mother's home for her. And she came across these papers that showed that she was adopted. And she's a 40-year-old grown woman who had no idea that she was adopted. And as she was telling me this story, I was like, damn. And she was talking about like certain things in her childhood that she remembers, like just not adding up, and how her mother was very secretive about certain things, and how she sometimes thought that she didn't look like the people in her family. And I just kept thinking to myself, oh my God, this is a play, or this is a film, or this is a book, but you need to write that story. And I was thinking, if you don't want to write it, girl, I'm sure going to write it, right? And that's the other thing, when you become a writer, everybody around you is still going to be going like this, shh, don't talk about it, because she's going to write about it. That's what my family say about me at all times. They're like, for sure, it's my mother always says, don't say nothing in front of her because it will end up on stage. And she's right, right? So the next slide, please. So there's the why, what do all writers do? And we are going, what should I write about, right? How many of you right now, and let me come back to me right now, tell me in the chat, what should I write about? How many of you are stuck right now? Let me know on what should I write about? What's the story, right? Write what you know, right? Is the biggest thing that I tell all writers, right? What makes you unique is you know what you know, right? You know your family structure. So these are some of the things that as I became a writer, which was really important to me, I remember going to theater in Toronto and never seeing Black people on stage, just never, right? And I think the first play I ever saw with a Black person on stage was, oh my God, what was that Janet Sears play? Was it Black Girl in Search of God? I think it's Black Girl in Search of God. Yes, Black Girl in Search of God. And I saw a Black woman telling a story on stage. And then I also knew, for me, I wanted to see my culture on stage. Like, my background is my family is Jamaican, right? I grew up very working class. My mom is a single mom. I was really raised by really strong, dominant women who had a really hard time dealing with emotions. and expressing themselves. So a lot of times in my work, there's always a strong mother figure. There's always some elements of Caribbean culture in all of my work. It usually always centers on family dynamics, right? And then for me, and I talk about language because this was something I remember a few years ago. I produced, she's my ex now, but she's a wonderful, great friend of mine. And she's also a godmother to my son. And she wrote a play called Spanish on My Tongue, and I produced it for her. And she really felt it was necessary to have a play that dealt with language and to have Spanish in it. And because she was just like, I've never seen that. And I thought how important that was. And her whole play was about, and when it comes down to talking about write what you know, her whole play was through the eyes of her as a young girl, translating all of her life for her mother and father, and the whole thing of like how she became just this young adult and had to play like the roles were reversed in her family because her family didn't have the language to kind of, her parents didn't have the language to advocate for themselves. And it was a story that she felt she really needed to tell, and that it was so true to her. And for me, I was just blown away because for me, who came from a family who was Jamaican, but even though they speak patois, it's still very much they know English and navigate through the world as English speaking. It was something that I never had to think about. And yet this was something that really had shaped her identity, right? So I always say to writers, is there something that just makes you unique of how you walk through the world? So for her, it was about language and being this translator of language for her parents, right? The other thing is beliefs, like what have you grown up believing, right? And are you challenging them? A lot of times too in my plays I talk about queer identity. It's very important to me. I grew up in a household, and I always say to people, I grew up in a household, and I'm not saying all Jamaicans are homophobic, but I will say my damn family was a Jamaican homophobic family, right? So I grew up in a household believing, the belief was that homosexuality was wrong. The belief was that homosexuality was only things that white people did, that Black people did not do that, and especially Jamaicans, we didn't. And so this was something that I challenged a lot in my work and my writing was these beliefs, right? Of how did my characters struggle with that, right? And combat that, right? So that's the whole theme pretty much. Also in my play, um, God, I sometimes draw a blank on all of my work because all of them have something Black in them, right? I got Black Girl in Love with Herself. Oh, yeah, and How Black Mothers Say I Love You. So, How Black Mothers Say I Love You is the play what deals with sexuality, right? And the migration and immigration experience. That plays a lot into my work, right? Because that is something that was very true to me. I came from a family where my mother had left her behind as a young girl. I was also left behind as by my mother in England. My mother was left behind by her mother in Jamaica when her mother went to England, and it was something that I felt really shaped our identity as women and how we factored and moved through the world. So that is something that I feel that I always say to writers, what has shaped you? Like, has migration shaped you? Has immigration shaped you? Has being an immigrant, or also maybe being the first in your family to live here in Canada or be born here in Canada, how has that shaped you? Right? Class is a huge thing for me that I talk about a lot in my writing. And it's things that I'm giving you these things because I think a lot of times when I tell writers to write what they know, they're like, oh, well, my family's kind of boring. I don't, there's nothing really that fascinating. And then as we start to dig deeper, I kind of go, okay, like, how did you grow up? Did you grow up working class? Did you grow up with a lot of money? What was the dialogue around money in your household? Did your family spend money and you really knew that they were spending way more money than you guys had, right? Did you come from a family who was always worried about money? Was there someone in your family who was a gambler? So there was things like that worried you as a child, right? There, I talk about it a lot in my book, Black Girl in Love with Herself. I grew up in a family where we had moved from a very working class Rexdale neighborhood, and we moved to Brampton. And I was very aware. I had classmates in my um, school who were getting $10 a day for lunch money, and I was getting $10 a week if my mother felt good about it, right? And so I was very aware growing up that even though we lived in this house that was, comparable to some of my classmates, my family was not making the same amount of money as they were. Like one of my former best friends, her father was a judge and sorry, a lawyer. And they had like two Mercedes Benz like parked up in the driveway. And I would go to their house and they had a housekeeper. And I was kind of like, what? Well, this ain't happening in my house, right? And so those are the things that I also talk about in my work a lot, is class and how class has shaped me and shaped the characters, right? The other thing too that you could think about within your own family is family structure and dynamic. Did you come from a two-parent household? Did you come from a single family household? Did you come from a queer family? Did you come from a family where your grandmother was the one who raised you, right? Did you come from a family where maybe your parent died, um, just out of the blue, and you had to deal with that? And so the biggest question, which I love for writers to ask themselves when you're writing about what you know, is who are we as a family? Because I think the best drama and conflict comes from when you start to examine with your characters, where did they come from? Who shaped them? Because all of us, no matter how much therapy we do, we are all shaped by our family and our experiences, and we all walk through the world with those lenses. And so that creates a very dynamic and very juicy characters. When you start to think, when you're writing characters, who does this who does this character belong to? Who are their people? And how does it then shape them as they walk through the world? Does that make sense? Let me know. Need to I'm so missing live feedback. So I want to know if that makes sense to you guys. Please let me know. Are you now thinking about your family and how you walk through the world? Thank you, Finn. I love that. Carolyn, yes, great, 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 great. I miss your faces. I really do. Michael, thank you. Jess, yes. Nice. Sarah, absolutely. Amazing. Good, right? So thank you guys for just humoring me with this, of letting me know you're there, because I so miss feeling your energy, right? So I love this. So thank you. And I said it makes great sense, right? And such a love. Thank you, right? Because we all come from something and someone, right? Tamara says 100% agreed, right? Like when you think about also too, like religion, right? Like I talk about, which is so funny, and people always say this to me, that religion shows up a lot in my work, right? And how Black mothers say, I love you. Daphne is very, very religious, the mother, right? So because she's so religious and the family grew up in this very religious environment, she then has, of course, a harder time dealing with her daughter's sexuality, right? So people always say to me, did you grow up in a very religious household? So this is very funny. I didn't grow up in a very religious household at all, right? But I had one aunt, Auntie Pat, who I used to go to maybe once a month. I would go to her house, who was very religious, and she would go to these things called like church conventions. And we would go like Saturday and Sunday. And to me, who grew up in a house where I would definitely say my grandmother was one of those people who just could not stand, and she thought the whole church was crooked, right? So my grandmother was like, I am not giving those people my money. I can't stand them religious people, right? They're crooks, right? And then I would go to my aunt's house, who she would be praising God at all times. She would wear a little beret on her head, and she was always like talking about God. And so for me, I really felt that it shaped me in a way of that. I felt like I went from the house of sin of my grandmother's to this really strict Christian environment where my aunt would wear long jean skirts down to her knees, right? Past her knees. And so I felt religion shaped me in a way that I looked at religion, and you see this in my work in How Black Mothers Say I Love You, how the daughter really is very skeptical and it's not a true believer in how religion has impacted and shaped their lives as a family. And so this comes from me too, of living this kind of dual life with religion in my own life growing up, right? So that's another thing to think about when you're shaping characters. Did your character come from a household that was very religious, or did they come from a household who were quote unquote sinners or didn't believe in God? All of those things. And then where's the conflict comes in? Here's a great conflict. Someone who comes from a family who's super religious meets someone who is an atheist and they fall in love. What does that look like? Right? How does conflict come about for them? Right? So that's always what I always say, that there's always something that is this dual clash, right? People like conflict. And that's what makes good family drama, right? Be it for TV, be it for plays. It can never be like, it doesn't make sense of two religious people getting together if there's no conflict. But if you got somebody, or even if there was somebody who was really religious and then decided they don't no longer believe in God and they're married to someone who's highly religious, there's conflict there, right? So those are the things that I usually write about. Next slide. This is something, and I would love to hear your feedback on this because I feel a lot of people get really hung up on this, right? When I tell people to mine their family life stories for their story. And a lot of people, I've met so many writers who go, oh, once my mother dies, let me tell you the story I'm going to write, right? Or once my dad kicks the bucket, right? That everybody's waiting to write this story, right? And people also sometimes say, I don't know if I want to write this because it's so painful, right? Or I'm exposing some levels of truth about my family that I don't know if they're willing to hear, or even if I'm willing to go there as a writer, right? And one of the things that I've learned the most as a writer is there's a difference between being sensational and also standing in your truth and writing, right? And that is something that has been really essential and important to me, is to be that person who writes the truth, right? It's my truth. And if it's my truth, I'm going to write about it and I'm going to talk about it, right? Samantha just said, as a comedy writer, pain is where it's at. So true. You know, a lot of people always say to me, Samantha, the reason why you get away with writing so much of the stuff that you get to say and do is because you have this amazing gift to immerse comedy where there is pain, right? And I think about one of my most famous monologues, the Stacey Ann monologue, for those of you who saw The Kink in My Hair, where that monologue was about a young girl who'd come from Jamaica. And she was this really young, wide-eyed, very kind of vivacious, feisty little young girl who'd come from Jamaica. And how she talked, right, was in pure patois. That was the other thing too, that people were shocked that here we were at the Princess of Wales, and I had written a character who was talking in pure patois, right? And yet, in the beginning of the monologue, it's her talking about, you know, oh, me happy me come off foreign, but lad, it cool, right? She's talking about the cold weather, right? And she talks about wearing 3 pairs of long john, but lad, it cool, right? And she says, you know, and no matter how much jacket and sweater me wear, it still feel cool. Lad, Canada, cool, right? And then she goes, but all the same, I'm glad me come a foreign because so much people mad for come a foreign, right? So for those of you guys who aren't Jamaican, when she says, I'm glad to come a foreign, that means I'm happy that I come to Canada because so many people back in Jamaica are dying to come, right? So in that monologue, I have the whole audiences laughing along with that, right? And someone, Carolyn, said that I love that place so much. Like I laughed till like, right? Natalie said, I love that monologue. And then halfway through the monologue, it takes a very twisted, dark turn where she reveals that her stepfather, Mr. Brown, is sexually abusing her, right? And I wrote that monologue for myself when I had to deal with just like a history of sexual abuse in my own family. And it was something that I felt I needed to write. And that it was one of the most painful things that I had ever written. And I know from that monologue, if there was ever a monologue where I had gotten so much feedback, it was from so many women saying to me, right? That Trey, my God, it's the first time I've seen something like this on stage where it had me laughing and yet crying. And it was just rooted in such truth, right? And Debbie Young, who performed it, who, you know, was just amazing, dynamite. And she talks about it, that she had her own history of sexual abuse. So for her, the writing was so true and real for her that she just felt like, and even as I was writing it, there was sometimes I referenced things to her and she would say, okay, tweak this a little bit or tweak that, because she wanted it to be as authentic as possible. So I always say to people in writing, there's a truth in writing the pain, but it doesn't have to be sensational, right? But when you stand in truth and vulnerability, that's where you get really great characters. Next slide, please. So I talked about writing with vulnerability, and I really want to talk about that, and just for myself. And also, I'm going to throw this back out to you right now. As I was talking about this, was there something in you, or maybe you've been thinking about it for a long time? Do you have a story in you that you are scared to write because it will leave you too wide open to your own vulnerability, to a truth about yourself, to a truth about your family that you know you have to talk about, but you haven't been able to? Carolyn said, absolutely, yes. Right? Anyone else that as I was speaking, you're like, oh my God, this is the story that I need to write? Anyone else? Yes, Banana, great. Thank you. And I always say the story that you are scared to write, um, is really the story that needs to be written, you know? And someone said, you know, it's scary and they're scared of the repercussions. Some people are going to get mad. That's the damn truth. Some people are going to get mad, you know, but I think it was Dare Abby who, I think it was Dare Abby or her sister, because they were twins, I think, who said, if you wanted me to write something nice about you, you would have treated me nicely. Right? And I just love that saying, right? Of if you wanted me to have something nice to say, you would have treated me nicely. And that's just the damn truth about it, right? So why am I holding what you have done to me or your mistreatment as sacred, right? So that is something that I really think that we need to think about as writers, right? And then someone said, Sarah said, scared to write because of the pain. Yeah, it can get very painful, very, very painful. Next slide. So I wanted to give you guys, because this is something, and usually I teach this workshop over an entire weekend. So I'm squeezing everything into 2 hours. But I really wanted, because I did not want to do a workshop where we are talking about writing and nobody writes a damn thing in this workshop today, right? I think that would just defeat the purpose. So even though I can't see all of your beautiful, wonderful faces, I know you're out there and I wanted to give you a writing exercise, right? And I'm going to do a condensed version of this because this is something that usually when I teach this writing workshop, we take a whole afternoon to do what I have called the bio pages, right? And this is something where I always say to writers, this is where your story is. This is where your characters are going to come from. This is where you are going to find the truth. This is where your vulnerability lies. This is where you are going to find the story that needs to be written, right? So the bio pages. Click next slide for me, Natalie. When I teach this writing course, I always say to people, if there's one thing that I found as a writer, is that usually how we remember things really are in groups of 12, right? In groups of six, sorry, right? In 6 year spans, right? So I always say to people, right? Because this is what defines you. And I'm going to give you a little time to do this. 0 to 6, right? And some of you can remember this far. It's funny, I'm one of these people, and it's something that I'm still trying to unlock in therapy because I know something happened why I can't remember. I cannot remember anything up until the age of like 6 to 7. I just can't remember. And so I'm always shocked when people go, oh, I remember when I was 4 and this happened or that happened. And I'm like, you remember all of that? I don't remember that, right? 0 to 6, I want you to think about who you were, who was living in your house. Did anything significant impact you from 0 to 6, right? Did a parent die? Did someone move? Did you maybe hear a conversation about sex that you didn't know, right? And then 6 to 12, right? What happened ages 6 to 12 for you, right? For me, I always say my mother left England from ages 8 to 12. So that was a significant age group for me. From 6 to 12, many things shaped my identity from 6 to 12. I talk about the car ride with my grandmothers to go with my grandmother to visit my incarcerated uncle. Those things shaped my identity. I talk about living with my grandmother. I talk about the movement that happened a lot in my family, where at one point I was living with my maternal grandmother, then my paternal grandmother. So there was a lot of movement, right? So I want you to think about what happened, anything significant. There was one woman who wrote in one of my classes, and she said, I remember very clearly my mother having my brother, and she wouldn't get out of bed for days and for months, and nobody talked about it in my family. And she was like, I didn't think about this, of how that shaped me for so many years. And I said to her, that's your story, right? You need to write a story about a woman who grows up with a mother who definitely is suffering from some sort of depression or something, right? Because you know what that feels like, right? Or as a little girl, not quite understanding why your mother is gone, right? There was another person in my workshop who talked about her sibling committing suicide at age 17 and her finding, her brother's body, right? How that shaped her. There was someone who talked about, and sometimes it doesn't have to be this, huge thing. There was a woman who talked about being in a classroom when she was 9 and having this teacher she knows just hating her for no reason, and she couldn't figure it out, but it just really messed with her confidence. Or another person talked about she was bullied for many years from the ages of 12 to 14 and how that shaped her, right? So I said maybe the story is talking about bullying, right? 18 to 24, did someone get married? Did your sister leave the house? Did you go to college? Is this when maybe you're coming out in your first queer identity, right? Like I remember me, I was in high school at age, I think I was 16, and I said to my best friend, I think I'm gay. And she said, oh no, you're not gay. She said, you don't dress like a boy and you got a boyfriend, so you can't be gay. And I was like, yeah, you're right, I can't be gay. That was the end of it, right? But that conversation stayed with me, and it shaped how I then dealt with my own sexuality, right? So, and then I give you, because just of the time limit, I want you guys to pick an age that you're going to factor on, right? To focus on, sorry. So is it going to be 6 to 12, 12 to 18, or 18 to 24, right? And if you want to go after 30, if something significant happened at 30, maybe, you know, you got your first job or you bought your first home or you had your first serious relationship, that's fine too. But it has to be from 30 to 36, right? But I want you to really take, and I'm going to give you guys just due to time, because we have another writing exercise. I see here it says 2:56. And because 7 is my lucky number, I'm going to give you 7 minutes to write in some broad strokes and think about, where were you living? What was happening in your household? What impacted you? What do you remember that stood out in those years that you think there's a story there? You know, someone talked about, and this may be also very painful for some of you, and I just really want to be aware of this as trigger warnings, right? There was a woman in my class who talked about sexual abuse that happened to her in from the ages of 6 to 8, and that stood out to her as she was writing this. So I just really want to be very aware, because usually when we're in a classroom, there's much more support. I can feel your energy. I know what's triggering you. I can see when something is hard. So if it's too hard, don't go there. And maybe you want to go there later on, that's okay. But I just want to be really conscious. For some of us, this can be quite triggering as well, right? So go where it feels safe for you at this moment. And if later on you wish to process this and go further, then do so. Okay? So we're going to break, but I'm going to break. You're not going to break. You are going to write your bio pages and pick an age to write some things. And I would love people to share maybe 2 things in the chat box if you feel comfortable as it comes up for you. Okay, so you got 7 minutes. Is everybody clear about the writing assignment? If you're not, please just let me know in the chat box so I can clarify it for you. Okay, so we're going to write until 3:05, right? Clarify, please. So what would you like me to clarify, Finn? You're picking an age, so you can either do 0 to 6, right? You can either pick 6 to 12 or 12 to 18 or 18 to 24. And what I'm asking you to do is to think about your life and what was going on that has a memory for you that you think shaped you or changed the way things were happening in your family, right? So maybe like for me, for example, 6 to 12. My brother was 6 years younger than me. So I remember very clearly my mother coming home and saying she was pregnant and how excited I was about having a sibling, right? So that shaped me. Then age 8, my mother leaving, right, and going to Canada, that shaped me. Me moving in with my grandmother, that shaped me. Me going to visit a prison every Sunday, that shaped me, right? So that's what you're going to be thinking about. What in your life do you remember from those ages that stood out for you? Maybe it was, did your parents get divorced, or did a parent die? Did you go to a new school? Did you move? All of those things, there's a story in there, if that makes sense. Okay? Finn, are you good? I wish I could see faces. Okay, great. Okay, so you got 7 minutes, folks. It's actually 3:00 now, so we're going to write to 3:07, and it could just be very broad point form, broad strokes, you know, and you could do it in point form, or you can write it, whatever feels comfortable for you. All I want you to do, though, I want you to write. Write, write, write. Do not censor yourself. Okay, there we go. We got 7 minutes, so I'm just going to sit here and look at you, or pretend to look at you. And don't cheat yourself. Do not cheat yourself. Write what you know and write what you remember. There was someone in my last workshop who talked about remembering that she used to wet the bed all the way up until age 14 and what that felt like for her and the shame and hiding the sheets. And I just thought, oh my God, what a story that is of how you move through the world as someone who, used to wet the bed for so many years, and how that shapes how, she talked about not wanting to go to sleepovers and always thinking that she smelled like pee and urine and things like that. And so for many years, she was really self conscious. And she could trace that back after she did this workshop to her bedwetting, right? So those are things that I'm making you guys think about, like what shaped you. For those of us who are queer, when was the first time that you remembered or thought that you were queer? When was the first time you saw a queer fam? I remember, I talk about this a lot. The first time I saw a butch lesbian, it just changed my whole damn life. And I remember very clearly at age 11 meeting the first out butch lesbian. And I was like, that's who I want to be. That's who I want to be. Oh, seeing Katie Lang. Yes. I love that. Katie Lang. Yeah. Me, it was Tracy Chapman as well, because I was kind of like, come on, Tracy, you know what's up. Wait, George. I love that. Wait, George. I have keys on it. Wow. And the musical. Okay. Got 3 more minutes, guys. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just want you to think about certain moments that shaped you, where you can maybe go back later and think about writing something from that experience. Right? Without fear. Oh, I like this. Yolanda Brown said at age 7, I declared I would be an artist. I didn't see the rest. Oh, you guys are coming. Oh, I love this. Oh my God, Catherine, I love that. Going for a rest in the hospital. Oh, you guys have some stories. And I love Michael said, I asked about Boy George if he was a boy or girl, and he only told me things are different in England. Those English people. Oh, I love how our families do not talk about queerness. Oh, that is hilarious. That is too hilarious. Oh my gosh. Ugh. All right. Time is up, folks. Um, so I'm going to just touch on some of the things that you guys said, right? I think, was it Michael who talked about the boy George, right? If there was a character, imagine writing a character of a coming out story of a little boy asking, right, about boy George, right? Or a little girl about boy George, right? Or someone questioning their identity as a little person and just finding out what that looks like and what that conversation. And you can, and one of the things that I always say to people, and this is why my family can't stand me, is I use the exact words, right, that my family say, right? And that's why my writing usually sounds so authentic. So for example, in How Black Mothers Say I Love You, right? There was a line in there where Daphne, when she was having an argument with her daughter Claudette about being gay, and she said, "You must have learned this from the white people at work, right? Because we don't do that here in this family." And that was a line exactly how my grandmother said it to me when I came out to her. And she said, "Trey, you must have learned that from the white people at work. It's the white people," right? And I took the exact line, right? And I do that. There was another monologue that I did talking about colorism in the family, right? And my grandmother, God bless her soul, loved light skinned people. And we had a lot of problems in our family around colorism. Like me and my brother were the darkest in my family. And my grandmother used to always say, anything too black is never good. And I wrote a whole monologue over that one saying that I grew up hearing all my life. Anything too black is never good, right? So sometimes it's that one thing that you remember growing up, hearing over and over that will spark a story in you, right? So, so just think about that, sayings and things. How did you guys find that exercise? Were there things that came up for you that you were shocked about, that you remembered? Anyone? Oh, I like Liz says, coming to Canada for university from the States, and for the first time in my life, living in a new city or country where no one knew me before. I had complete freedom to find myself. Yes. Oh, I like got my first period at age 11. Yes. And my mother hijacking my therapy. Yes. Oh, good. I like that. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Darcy said dividing into groups of 6 really helps. That is one of my biggest writing tools that I use, and one of my favorite things that I use when I'm teaching writing is saying to people, break up your life by groups of 6. You will find your stories there, because sometimes you get overwhelmed with, oh my God, what part should I start with? So I always say, start at the part what you remember the most, or you think something impacted your life the most, right? So I always do 6 to 12. That's one of my favorite years that I remember the most. And so I usually, a lot of my characters are based or talk about their childhood as they're reflecting about being that age, right? Anyways, let's go on. Next slide for me, please, guys. Oh, Michael said, hold on, I missed Michael. Okay. This is something that I think people really get caught up in. And if I miss some of your questions, we'll come back. I'm going to have a Q&A or your statements. Please know I'm really thankful and I'm really appreciating all of the interaction. It just feeds me. I just love this. And I wish I could see you guys. I really do wish I could see you. But I'm so happy that you guys are getting something from this, right? The next thing is writing with description, right? This is something that I do a lot, is people watch. I love watching people, right? And sometimes, especially if I'm dating somebody new, people are always like, oh my God, I didn't realize you're so observant. Because I watch, right? Like it's simple things of like, what do they do when they like something? If they're eating something that they like how do their lips move, right? Are they a person who savors something? Or they're a person who gobbles everything up, right? Do they lick their lips, right? One of the things that my family always talks about is how I talk with my hands, right? That I'm a type of person who's always talking with my hands, right? So usually when I'm writing characters, I talk about their hands and what their hands look like and their fingers and their fingernails, right? So as a writer, you need to start to really look at people, watch them. What are their habits? What things do they do that they're not even aware of, right? That is something, a friend of mine, we were watching, this is so crazy, but it's so true. We were watching 90 Days Fiance. This is some of the crap that I sometimes watch. And there's a character on there called Colt, right? Colty. And I didn't even notice this until she pointed it out to me, that he has this kind of very obsessive habit that every time he's about to talk, he touches his glasses, like he does this, and he pushes his glasses back upon his face. And I was like, oh my God. And so this new play that I'm writing, one of the things that I wrote now is that anytime he has something that he's grappling with or struggling with, he touches the side of his glasses. Because I just found that so intriguing, that that one little thing creates character for somebody, right? It's something that really shapes their character of just touching their glasses, right? So I thought that was very, very interesting. Next slide, please. So building character traits, right? What does your character do when they are nervous, right? Somebody pointed this out to me and I had no idea that I did this, but I do this. And it's something that I now am writing in my new play that I'm doing. I have OCD around bathrooms, right? I have serious OCDs around bathrooms. So this new person said to me, who's come into my life, do you notice that you're always cleaning the bathroom and that you close the bathroom door wherever you go? You close all bathroom doors. And I had no idea that I did this. I wasn't aware that I do this, but I do this because there's something in my mind, and I'm sharing this, it's very personal, that I feel that there's a whole bunch of germs in the bathroom. So I close it, right? Because I don't want it to spread to anywhere in the house. And so I'm very OCD around bathrooms. And even when I go on vacation, I never let my feet touch the bathroom floor. I always bring slippers, sandals, or whatever. And that's a character trait that I'm trying now to build into one of the characters I'm writing, of what her OCD looks like, right? And maybe it's something as simple as that they lick their lips when they're nervous, right? A friend of mine, I remember meeting her for lunch, and I call it the gray eyelash, right? And I hadn't seen her in a while. And when I met her, what stood out to me is that she had one gray eyelash. And I was so fascinated with it, right? Like I kept looking at it. And so when I wrote, oh my God, what's it called? Park Lane Sluts, my first fictional novel that I'm writing, one of the things that I wrote is that the mother was so obsessed with her looks that the morning she got up and she saw a gray eyelash, she started to cry. And the daughter was like, I realized for my mother, this was symbolic of her not being able to control her aging anymore. And so it was something that I made it that every single day that this woman got up, she would look at this eyelash and it was symbolic of her thinking about her aging, right? And so it was a simple trait, but it's something that I built on, right? And it came from a real life experience that when I saw my friend, I was like, oh my God, who knew that someone could get a great eyelash, right? So that's when I talk about how you can start to build character around just everyday things that people do, right? Um, Daphne in the play, How Black Mothers Say I Love You. Anytime she didn't want to deal with something challenging or be confrontational with her daughter and her daughter wanted to talk to her, she would go, I'm tired, Claudette. I'm too tired right now. I'm tired, right? And that is something that my grandmother does. Anytime she wants to avoid conversation, she goes, oh, God, Granny tired, Granny head too, or no for all of that. So that was something that I use as a character trait to build character in my characters, right? Of something that was so normal to me that I know anytime my grandmother wants to avoid conversation, she says, I'm tired. My brother pointed this out to me the other day. He said, anytime you don't want to do something, you go, oh, okay, yeah. We'll see. And he goes, I know then when you say we'll see, that means you're not doing it, right? So think about even yourself, right? Of what things build character about you that people know about you, right? And everybody in my family started laughing and they go, that's the truth. Anytime Trey doesn't want to do something, she goes, okay, we'll see. Okay, we'll see, right? So those are the ways that you can build characters that makes them very juicy, that they do little things, right? Like maybe it's a person who every time they get up, they always make sure that their chair is pushed under the table. What does that tell you about somebody? That one thing that they do all of the time, that the chair has to be perfect under the table. What does that tell you? Then how does perfection look for them throughout their entire life, right? I'm also very aware of when I go into someone's car, I make a lot of judgment about how you keep your car. And I think it tells you a lot about what's going on in someone's life if you go into their car. It pretty much will tell you what's happening in their household. I'm a big believer in that, right? And I've built whole characters around someone who has a messy or dirty car, right? That's building a character. I see a question here. Let me come and see. How can we sign up for the weekend workshop? Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, we're going to come to that. Please remind me. I will tell you when I'm going to be doing my next one. It's going to be the end of July. So yes, right? So, because I'm squeezing everything into, as you guys know, 2 hours, which really is a 2-day workshop, okay? So think about that. Next slide, please. Writing exercise number 2, because I want you guys to write. It's not all about me talking, right? I'm going to give you guys some writing prompts, right? But first, I want to read you from, because I feel this is the most descriptive. Oh my God, where did I put this book? Please, book, where is it? Hold on, I had it here. I was reading it today. Let me look for it. 1 second. Oh, here it is, because it's one of my favorite books. And it's, I usually, and what I love is that she's Canadian, and her name is Lori Lanson. I don't know if you guys have ever read this book. It's one of my favorite books, right? My favorite book is The Girls, right? And what I love, and I'm going to make you guys, I'm going to read this, is her description of how she writes description. And this book is about 2 women who are conjoined twins, and they're joined by the head. And it's such a fascinating book because she writes, you see how 2 people who are practically, you would think, going through the exact same experience because they're joined by the head, see the world so differently. But what I love, and this is the part that I always read in my workshops, is how she uses description to paint who these women are. So I'm going to read this to you, and before we go into our second exercise, so you can think about what good descriptive writing sounds like, right? So I'm going to read this part. So it's Lori Lanson. It's called The Girls. It's one of my favorite books. You can see it's worn out because I use this in every single writing workshop. And I've read this book a million times because I just love it. I think she's one of the best writers out there. And I will say that. Okay. So Ruby and I are identical twins and would be identical looking, having high foreheads like our mothers and wide, full mouths, except that Ruby's face is arranged quite nicely. In fact, Ruby is very beautiful, whereas my features are misshapen and frankly grotesque. And here's the description, which I love, where she talks about my right eye slants steeply towards the place my right ear would have been if my sister's head had not grown there instead. My nose is longer than Ruby's, one nostril wider than the other, pulled to the right of my brown slanted eye. My lower jaw shifts to the left, slurring my speech and giving a husky quality to my voice. Patches of eczema rouge my cheeks, while Ruby's complexion is fair and flawless. Our scalps marry in the middle of our conjoined heads, but my frizzy hair has a glint of auburn, while my sister is a swingy brunette. Ruby has a deep cleft in her chin, which people find endearing. I'm 5 feet inches tall. When we were born, my limbs were symmetrical in proportion to my body. Presently, my right leg is a full 3 inches shorter than my left. My spine is compressed, my right hip cocked, and all because I have carried my sister like an infant since I was a baby myself. Every time I read that paragraph, I'm just like, you just picture it, like you see it. You know exactly what they're talking about. And I just love how she describes it down to how she carries her sister's hair, right? Someone asked what book was that? It's called Lori Lanson, The Girls. Brilliant book, brilliant book, one of my favorites. And I think as a writer, I've never seen a writer who's able to be this descriptive in her writing. So I would definitely tell you to get that. And Cheryl just said, let me read what you said, Cheryl. Hold on. I want to see what you said. Cheryl, what did you say? Sorry, I lost you. Cheryl said, oh, wait, hold on. I'm trying to get there. Oh, I don't know where Cheryl's comment went. I saw something about you being a twin. Now I can't see it. Okay, I'll come back to it. Right? So, but the writing exercise, oh, here it goes. She goes, oh, it was private. Sorry. So I'm not going to read it. It was private. Okay. So I just thought it was just so beautiful. Oh, sorry. Cheryl said, I'm a twin. Is this supposed to be private, Cheryl? I don't know. Because now it says private. Okay. I will not read it then. Because I do you want me to read it? Okay. All right. She says, I am a twin and know that because me and my twin don't look alike, we're often judged, myself negatively because of my Afrocentric features. Oh my God. That would be an amazing story. I don't know if you've heard of the book. It's called, oh my God, I can see it. Caucasian. And it's about 2 sisters. They're not twins, but they are mixed race. And one sister passes for white and one sister is black, like looks more black. And the whole story is told through the eyes of the sister who passes for white. And it's so engaging. So I just thought about, you might find that very interesting to read as a writer, to see how she talks about the 2 points of views as these 2 sisters, as one passing for white and one being able to go through the world. So I think there you have a story, right? So anyways, the writing exercise, and you don't have to be as descriptive as Lori, but I'm going to do it really quickly because I want you to just think about this really quickly, right? We're going to give you exactly 5 minutes, and you're going to choose one of these writing prompts to be descriptive, okay? So the first one is, don't start writing yet, but you're picking one. My father's hands reminded me of. So I want you to describe them. What do they look like? His nails, the color of his skin. Are they soft? Are they hard? Are they withered? You know, does he have dirty nails and why? Is it clean? Is he, those things, right? The next one that you could pick is, she always did this when she was nervous. I want you to describe what she does when she's nervous, right? And think about somebody that you know, maybe it's yourself, and be very descriptive of what does nerves look like. Because I think sometimes as a writer, what we get stuck in is we'll be like, oh, she was nervous. Don't say she was nervous. Tell me what nervous looks like, right? Is she pacing the floor? Is she biting her lip? Is she not giving me eye contact? Don't get caught up thinking one word is going to describe your character, right? The other writing prompt, her eyes looked. Describe those eyes. What are those eyes like, right? This one always makes people laugh because I think they think about having an STD, but I keep it there. It was a burning sensation that spread. When I wrote this writing prompt, I was actually thinking about someone being in love with somebody, but someone in my last writing class said they thought about an STD. So I found that quite amusing. So I kept it. The other thing, his laughter filled the room, and I immediately. So, what does someone's laughter do to you? People always talk a lot to me about my laugh, that they will recognize my laugh anywhere they are. They're like, we don't even have to see you, we just know it's you laughing, right? So, think about someone who has a laugh that you know and you could describe it. The other one is the heaviness in the room. Describe what it feels like for something to feel heavy in a room, right? How do you know something feels heavy? Describe that in detail, okay? So pick one. Usually in my writing class, we go through all of these and people come up with some amazing stuff and we read it aloud. But, I wanted you guys to make sure that you wrote today. So pick one, and I'm going to give you exactly, you guys know, 7 minutes because seven's my lucky number. And if we have time, we could talk about what the experience was because I don't think we could share it unless you guys want to cut and paste, maybe. I'm not sure. Okay, so 7 minutes, go ahead, pick one of the writing prompts to use. Is everybody clear on the assignment, or does anybody need some clarity? Everybody clear? We all good? Okay, good. Seven minutes, guys. Okay, 4 more minutes, guys. Okay, 2 more minutes, guys. If anybody wants to cut and paste something that they feel like sharing, I would love to read some of them aloud if you feel comfortable. If you don't, no pressure. That's one thing about my writing workshop. I always say to people, you have no pressure to share. But if some of you want to share, that'd be great. The other thing that I also say about writing is as you are hearing other people's work, do not compare your writing voice and writing style to anyone else. This isn't a competition. All of us write in a different way. We are all different writers. Okay. So if I was going to sit here and compare myself to Shakespeare, I don't write like Shakespeare, right? He was a playwright. I don't write like him, right? So that's everybody has an audience for their work, right? People who go out to see Janet Sears' work won't necessarily come out to see mine, vice versa, right? But we're all good writers. So you will find an audience and someone will love your stuff, right? So just think about that. Okay, I see a few. I'm going to just go and read them. Let me see. Ooh. Wow. Michael, some good stuff there. I hope you guys are reading some of your participants' work. I love it. I love the thing about looking after the old woman. Oh, Liz. Mm. Mm. Good work, guys. Liz, I love it. Oh, Catherine, my God, sweat just sounds different. I love it. I love the upper lip. Mm. Okay, well, you guys just send me your commission check because I feel we got some writers in this room. Carolyn, oh my God. Wow, he was not the one. Carolyn, get out of my bedroom. Yes, I love that. Really great description. Amanda, I'm reading yours right now. Mm. I love that description. She would use her right index and thumb to pinch her nose as if massaging like technique would organize her thoughts and slip her the right one. Ooh, damn. Love it. Oh my gosh, guys. I'm so impressed. You don't need me. You don't need me. You don't need me. Really good stuff. Thank you for sharing because I know how vulnerable that can be. Great work. Oh my God. I'm trying to read as many people as I can. Yolanda. Is that the same Yolanda that I know? Is that you, Yolanda? I hope it is. Oh, I love that. I love that, how you described her laughter. That's amazing. Like the edges of mac and cheese. That's Yolanda, that's all my favorite things. Mac and cheese and brownies. I don't know how you got into my life, but there you are. Okay. Oh my God. Kim, yes. The heaviness in the chapel room. Oh my God. Okay. Wow, wow, wow. Yolanda, I didn't know it was you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Guys, if you are reading your classmates' work, please comment. I know as a writer, if there is one thing that we love, because we are harder on ourselves than anybody else, is somebody saying they connect with our work, right? No matter how many times you write something, you always want somebody to say, oh my God, I felt that, right? So I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Really, really good. How did you guys find that exercise? Chat to me, let me know. And then we're going to move on because, oh my God, we got 20 minutes and I want to leave 10 minutes, at least 15 minutes. We ran out of time, guys, but I'm going to leave this for you guys for the next writing exercise, and you guys can do this. What I have found, which has really helped in description and also helping you own characters and describing them, is what did their childhood home or room look like, right? So it's very important. I love when I usually always ask people this too, because it also shapes who you are, how you move through the world. Did you share a room, right? Did you have your own bed, right? I always know when people have grown up with siblings and people who haven't grown up with siblings, right? And I also know people who had their own room and people who didn't. It very much shapes characters, right? So one of the writing exercises, and we don't have time today because I do want to answer some of your questions. We ran out. Like I said, I tried to squeeze 2 hours of a 2-day workshop into 2 hours, right? But I'm hoping this will be something that you will take home with you, is your homework of describing your childhood home, right? Did you have wallpaper? Was there plumbing? Um, did it always feel like there was enough room in the house? Did it feel really big? Did it feel cold? Where in the room, where in the home did your mother sit? Where in the home did you go when you were feeling scared, right? All of these things add to character development, right? So that's one of the exercises that I will leave you with, okay? All right, next slide before we go. So some of you, because I do want to leave some time to answer some questions. I told you, Natalie said we're going to do it to 3:30, and I said, Natalie, let's make it 4 just to be on the safe side. You see, Natalie, we still ran out of time, but I'm so happy. I love doing this stuff. I really do. I don't know if you guys can feel how much I love teaching writing. So Carolyn said, this is the first time I've ever actually written anything. I never knew where to start before. So these exercises have been super helpful. Thank you, Carolyn. I'm glad you like them. These are things that I really believe in and truly believe in as a writer. And these are exercises that I give to every writer when I'm teaching a writing course. So where do you go from here as a writer, right? This is something that I get asked often as a, especially when you do a writing course with me. People get really excited, and I've been guilty of it too, where you have your little notebook and you're writing down stuff and you're doing all the exercises and you're feeling pumped in the class. And then a year from now, you're going to come across your writing notebook and you're going to smile and go, "Oh, that was a great class," and you still haven't written anything, right? Has that ever happened to anybody? Right? Yeah. So where do you go from here as a writer is up to you, right? But what I will say, if there's one thing that I've done, and it's something even as busy as I am, recently I said to my assistant, I said, "Oh my God, I realize why I'm feeling out of sorts is because I haven't been writing, and I haven't been writing enough. And I have not been carving out time as a writer," right? And so even if it's something as simple as saying every day that you write for 2 minutes, right? Or something as like you say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are my writing day. For me now, I actually put it, and for me, I have to put it in my schedule, because if I don't put it in my schedule, it doesn't become real to me. When I wrote Black Girl in Love with Herself, I actually had a writing schedule where I wrote every single day, because I knew I had to write this book. And I knew the only way I was going to do it is if I became super disciplined and focused. And so I wrote every day from 10 to 6. I took a break from 1 to 2 to have lunch with my son. And that was it. But every single day I was out on my patio, because it was the pandemic. So your ass couldn't go anywhere. And I wrote every single day. And I wrote that book, here it is, Black Girl in Love with Herself. Some of you guys have it. I wrote it in 5 months. 5 months. I wrote the whole damn thing. But I wrote it every single day from Monday to Saturday, every day. So it's possible. It is indeed possible, right? How many of you right now have a writing schedule? How many of you guys write? Anyone? Oh, Carolyn said, "I love Black Girl in Love." Thank you, thank you, thank you, right? Anyone here has a writing schedule? If you don't have a writing schedule, you have to be writing. Does corporate writing count? Nah, I don't think so. I don't think so. Unless corporate writing brings you joy. Does it bring you joy? because if it brings you joy, then yes. And journaling, I do believe journaling counts because I believe if there's anywhere that I go when I'm writing something or I get stuck, is I reread my journals because I always find story in my journals. So journaling does count. Even if it's to say you journal every day, definitely. Someone asked the question, and I'm going to take some questions before we wrap. So any questions, please shoot them here and now. How do you deal with writer's block and procrastination? That is such a good one. Good one, good one, good one. This is what I do, right? And I did this in my last writing course, and I told people to do this. I told some of the panel, not the panelists, some of the members to get together, right? And they started their own little Facebook group. And I said to them, I want you, and this was when the world was opening up, right? When the world was actually open. And I said, I want you 3 months from now, right? Pick a date. So supposing it was December 10th. And I said, okay, December 10th, I want you guys to, each of you, to send out an invitation saying we are having a group reading December 10th. And you guys, you book a venue, like a small little venue, it could be in a little library, it could even be in your damn living room, right? This was when the world was open. And I said, tell them you're going to be reading the first 10 pages of, be it your play, your screenplay, your book, but set a date and send shit to people to let them know you're going to be writing something. It forces you. I truly believe there is no way. I've been talking about writing a full book, Black Girl in Love with Herself, for years. I do not think I would have finished this book unless I had a deadline in place and I knew a publisher was waiting for my ass to drop it off. Theater was different for me. I found writing plays, I usually actually go away. This was before I had a child. And I would go away and write, do a really serious writing, intense workshop for myself and write every day for 2 weeks to get it off the ground, right? How I deal with procrastination is I also do a timer. So I do something where I write straight for 7 minutes. 7's my lucky number if you guys haven't figured that out yet. Then I break for 7 minutes and I walk around, I look outside, and that always gives me some level of inspiration. And then I go back again for 7 minutes and write. So that's how I deal with procrastination. And I also tell people that I'm writing. I love to make announcements and saying this is what I'm working on because it forces me to actually work on stuff, right? So that is something that I found has really helped, right? Yolanda asked, do you use mind maps or no, I don't. I'm really an old school kind of writer, eh? I do read a lot. I get a lot of inspiration from reading other people's work. I also journal a lot, but I don't do mind maps or visual art. I really don't. Usually what it is, and this is the other thing that also compels me a lot. Just today, I can sometimes be a bit morbid, but I was reading an article on Facebook about that building that just collapsed in Miami, right? And they were saying that people couldn't be found. And it was a building that just collapsed. Like it just absolutely collapsed. There's no rhyme or reason. And people were stuck in the building. And there was one woman, they said that they actually had to amputate her leg to get her out. And some people, I think there's now like about 60 people missing. And the thought that occurred to me as I was reading it, I was like, I would love to write the story about someone wondering if the person who they cannot find, if they still are in that building or not. And it was just something that just stuck with me. Like I just kept saying, how does that feel? Because it was a woman talking about she's not sure if her parents are alive or dead and she can't get in touch with them. And it just kept playing in my mind. I was like, oh my God, that's a story. Like, how do you go through life not knowing if they got out or not, right? So it's things like that that stay in my mind. Like I read a lot of news sometimes, or something sticks with me and I go, oh my God, that's a story, right? So sometimes it's about reading headlines, sometimes it's about reading news, sometimes it's just observing someone in a coffee shop and you feel like they have a story. right? That's kind of how I deal with getting ideas and dealing with procrastination, right? And your writing practice, what should it look like? Your writing practice should look like something that you reasonably can achieve, right? I'm not one of those people who say, write every single day. You got to write every single day. All I say is stick to what you say you're going to do. The worst thing you can do is lie to yourself. Like I said, I'm not a writer who writes every day. I am a writer who can write every other day for 2 hours, and that's my thing. And that's how I write. You have to really ask yourself, what kind of writer and who can I be? I do journal though every single day. And that is something that I stick to. Do I write creatively every day? No. Do I watch a lot of TV every day to give me some ideas? Yes. And do I listen to a lot of podcasts? Yes, I love listening to crime podcasts. That gives me ideas as well, books. But you've got to immerse yourself in reading and writing and reading other people's work. I never understand when writers go, oh, I don't read. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, I don't get it. And especially now in this world when you can listen to audible books, you have no excuse. You can be actually immersing yourself in your craft, right? Okay, next slide, Natalie. And someone said, have you used your journal as a, I think it's probably tool? Is that what you say? Oh, yes, because it kind of, to pull from your writing, definitely. My journal is my biggest resource as a writer. I use my journal for everything. I do not think there's ever a project that I have not gone back into my journal to look at, because I'm also very dramatic, if you guys haven't figured that shit out. So when I write, especially when I look at some of my journals when I was like 12 or 13, like, oh my God, I'm gonna die because Kevin Brown in grade 8 just told everybody that I have a big nose. So it's just so like, sometimes I look back on my stuff and I'm like, seriously, Trey, this is the thing that was keeping you up at night, but those things kept me up at night, right? So I love to hear and see my voice of who I was at that time in my life. And even now, looking back of like the decisions I've been making, like I'm like, girl, man, we could do better. We could do better, you know? So yes, I do. Let me see. Someone said, I want to adapt a book into a teleplay. It's based on a true crime story. I love that. That took place in 1962 in Toronto. The story is very dark. I've been meaning to write the script up, yes, for the last 10 years. The story is very haunting, but must be told. How do you bring the story to fruition without getting caught up in the darkness of the story? This is a period piece, and I feel that I would have to go to a dark place to do research. Okay. That's such a good, a great question. I feel, especially when you're writing about dark things, like I've written about suicide, I've written about incest, I've written about police brutality, and it's about pacing yourself, right? You can immerse yourself. Just recently, I wrote a script called Missing White Woman that I was using as my pilot script to get TV jobs in writing rooms. And it was about all of the missing young Black girls that have gone missing across the US. And so I was watching a lot of stuff around missing young girls, and I was reading a lot of crime reports. And sometimes you have to really take a check of yourself and know when you're getting in too deep. And for me, there was a point where I had to put the script down and put it away for a couple of days because it was just too triggering for me. And I think especially now as a mother, when I read stuff around child abuse and things like that, I'm just like, I can't deal with it. So I will say, if you are writing dark stuff, make sure there's a balance, that you have time when you are writing, and then there are times that you are like, I'm letting this go, and I need to do things that actually bring me joy. Because especially as writers, I think many of us who are writers are really deeply empathetic, yeah, empaths, right? And I'm one of those people that I take on a lot of emotions. I feel things really a lot. My emotions are very heightened. And I think that's why I'm able to tap into things, because I'm very intuitive. but I also have to recognize when things feel too heavy and that I need to step back. Just recently, I was listening to this podcast called Black Hands, and it was about this guy who had murdered his entire family in Australia. And I was listening to it in the car, I was listening to it as I was cooking, I was listening to it as I was jogging, and I had to stop because I realized that it was getting too much for me, and I couldn't finish the whole podcast. Even though I'm really into writing a crime drama, I was like, I can't listen to this anymore. It's too much. So I think it's really about pacing yourself and knowing when enough is enough. But if it's a story that is really that you feel within yourself that you need to write, then you need to write it. Okay. So we are coming to an end. It's 3:57. If you want to get in touch with me, there's Black Girl in Love, TreyAnthony.com. If you want, please give your email and information to Natalie. I could tell you guys about my next weekend workshop I'm going to be doing. If you want to continue to work with me, please let me know. If you loved the workshop, please send me a note to let me know that it resonated with you. I love to use your reviews on my website and Instagram, and it just makes me feel good when I know people liked the workshop. So thank you ever so much. I really appreciated it. And I hope you guys got something as writers. And as I said, what do all writers have in common? Right? What do all writers have in common? It's not a damn trick question. We write. Okay? You cannot be a writer without writing. So just damn well write. Write the book that you always wanted to read. Write that screenplay that you know that you needed to do. Write that thing that keeps you up at night. And actually, be true to yourself. Keep your word to yourself. If you can't keep your word to yourself, why do you think you can keep it to anybody else? Okay, don't be a liar to yourself. Write. Okay, be that writer. Thank you guys ever so much. Thank you, Natalie, for organizing this and your team and the tech people and everybody behind this. Thank you so much for having me. I really, truly appreciated it. You guys, if you loved it, if this was free, the book isn't free. Go buy my damn book to show your appreciation. Black Girl in Love. It has really some really great writing, memoir writing in there, and support me and my book. Thank you guys. Love ya.
Thank you so much, Trey. That was amazing. We all want to say thank you. That I was laughing. I was shouting at my screen during that. Thank you so much. That was incredible. We thank you for your time, your energy, your teachings. I actually learned quite a lot in that time. 2 hours was pretty great. It was so nice to see you. And everyone, thanks for attending. That was it was so nice to do something creative.
Thank you.
We're going to sign off here. Have a great day, everyone. Yes, please, you feel free to email me or connect with Trey. If you want information on the workshop, I can actually post it on our website, Trey. Maybe that's what I'll do.
Okay.
I'll get the information about your workshop. I'll post it on our website, and that way people can access it easily. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Sounds great. Oh my God, this was the quickest 2 hours ever in my life.
It went by so fast.
Walking in my truth, because I just love doing this kind of thing. I love seeing people being creative. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And if anyone told me I would have to sit for 2 hours on something on a Zoom call, I would have been like, oh, heck no. But this was no time at all. It was great. Thank you so much. We'll chat soon.
Okay. Thank you guys. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.